I see everyone joining. We are running a few minutes behind. We've had one of those mornings where Zoom was fighting with us. So we do apologize for the delay, but we're going to kick off now. A big welcome to you all who are joining. I believe from around the country and further afield, some of you. My name is Fiona Kyle. I'm the CEO of Mental Health Reform. We're Ireland's national coalition for mental health. We represent over 80 member organisations, and we also have thousands of individual supporters. Mental Health Reform has been running a series called Coalition Conversations for the last number of years. This is really a platform to explore new developments, innovations in mental health, and to facilitate knowledge sharing, dialogue and debate among the sector to really try and drive forward progress. This is the second of this year's series, and we're really delighted to have been able to partner up with our member organisation Shine and their amazing Sea Change initiative to mark the Green Ribbon Month, which this year focuses on the theme of judgment. So Nicola is going to delve into the Green Ribbon Month and tell us a little bit more about that shortly. But today's webinar is really significant, and I think it's really speaks to the heart of our own values in mental health reform and what we're trying to achieve. And it's very much focused on the real importance of the lived experience voice, that those who have experience of using our services are really experts and need to be heard as such, and how speaking openly about experiences of mental health can really help challenge the judgment of mental health difficulties. In mental health reform, our work is really about putting mental health at the top of the priority list in government and in public discourse, that we really want that mental health not be treated as an afterthought, but a fundamental aspect of our health system, a fundamental aspect of human well-being, deserving of the highest priority. And unfortunately, in Ireland, and I think the stigma that surrounds and still surrounds mental health has meant that it's always been there as an afterthought. It's never quite been at the top of that priority list. And our work, which we do in terms of really ensuring that mental health is kind of a political priority, and that at the moment we have our pre-budget campaign, which really is about ensuring that there's adequate investment into the services. But it really needs to be we really need the experience of those who are accessing our services, those who who have experience of mental health difficulties, to be at the core of everything that we do, because only by doing that do we really unlock the potential it has. Openly sharing those experiences, it's such a powerful tool, not only for the individual but for the movement in terms of mental health. Speaking, it's not only courageous, but it's also instrumental in bringing mental health to the forefront of the political agenda. And that means driving positive change, making the system more responsive, more empathetic, and ultimately more effective for those who are using it. That is all what we want to achieve, is that the system is working for those who are accessing it. And today's webinar, we're going to delve into that. And I'm really fortunate to be joined by some really distinguished speakers who have real personal experience as advocates of speaking out, and are able to personally speak to the power of that, and how by dismantling those barriers that we can really ensure that we're progressing towards a human rights-based mental health service and support. So I'm going to just give you a brief overview of this morning. So I'm shortly going to be handing over to Nicola, as the CEO of Shine, to talk about the Green Ribbon campaign. We're then going to have a panel discussion with our experts here. Just like we always at the fore of everything, of all of our sessions, we always acknowledge that, you know, everyone's experience is unique, and some people may find some things triggering to themselves, but there is support out there. And please do see, you know, the HSE website, and also text 50808 if you want to start a conversation. It's free and anonymous. So yeah, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker today. So Nicola Byrne is the CEO of Shine. Nicola has over 25 years experience in the field of mental health, delivering has a huge track record in delivering successful projects and programs that has positively impacted communities. And I think, you know, Nicola's expertise lies a lot in portfolio management, as well as change management, social health, social research, mental health, and training and continuing education. Nicola has, in recent years, moved into the community and voluntary sector, where she's the CEO of Shine. And I think it's fair to say, you know, in her short time in the sector, she's shown real leadership and has been a real powerhouse in driving forward the importance of stigma reduction, the importance of really putting mental health on the map, and also bringing to the fore those voices of people who have more moderate to severe mental health difficulties, individuals who are often perhaps left out of those discussions, and individuals who are very much at the core of the work that Shine does. So delighted to welcome Nicola. So Nicola, over to you. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Green Ribbon campaign? What's it about, and how's September gone so far? I know you've been to the ploughing and survived it. So if you could give us a little bit of an insight, that would be great, Nicola.
Thanks, Fiona. I'm hoping I'm sharing the right screen now. Can you see that screen?
Yes,
yeah. Great. Okay. So I just want to give you a quick whistle-stop tour of Green Ribbon 2023 and tell you a bit about the work that we do. Will it move on? Sorry. Oh yeah, it moved. Thank you. So just to tell you about Shine, Shine has gone for more than 40 years. It was set up in the 70s. It was originally called Schizophrenia Ireland. We do 4 main approaches in our work. One is we offer frontline community mental health recovery support work, and that work we deliver for people with lived experience, and also separately for their supporters and family members. And we offer one-to-one group work, a lot of peer-led work as well. Another part of the work that we do is in advocacy and research. And one of the important components of that is we have the Voice platform, but we also are the host for the reference group for the National Implementation and Monitoring Committee for Sharing the Vision. And that work is really growing, and we're really pushing the importance of the voice of people with lived experience into policy and research and that. Another programme that we have is the Headline programme, and that's Ireland's national media programme responsible for reporting and representation of mental ill health and suicide. So you've seen a lot of our work this year. We've fellowships with the Carter Foundation, with the Mental Health Media Awards, and we monitor the media in this country. Today I'm here to talk to you about the Sea Change programme, and that's our National Stigma Reduction programme. So this year's campaign, we've tried to really elevate the work that we do this year and take it to the next level. We're in our 11th year. The theme this year is Judgment, and we launched on the 1st of September in the Mansion House. As part of this programme, we continue to push the Light Up Green campaign. So you should see buildings all over the country lit up green for the month of September. And the message this month is really about getting out and getting people to talk about their mental health and their own experience, lived experience. We had some fun with the start of the programme because we managed to get a choir of volunteers from the health services and from local choirs, and we Mike Hanrahan from Stockton's Wing donated a song to us, so we had just an extra bit of energy this year. We went on to take the campaign to Electric Picnic, and then we launched it in Cork. But what we've been doing this year is really focusing on increased engagement. We're trying to use social media differently, and you've probably noticed that, especially we've been targeting Instagram because we think that's a growing audience, and it's where an awful lot of people need more information about this kind of conversation. So we have really tried to mix things up this year. Already more than 500,000 ribbons have been distributed. We've looked for greater media exposure, and we've really pushed to engage with key audiences. So we've been at events like the ploughing, and we've had a lot of different events with both stakeholders in the voluntary sector, in the statutory sector, and also in the corporate sector, to try and get the conversation going differently. You may also have noticed that the Green Ribbons have an extra presence this year, even in the news. We have been really trying to get the coverage to the next level, and we've done a lot of different pieces on our social media around the work that we've done in the big programs we have. So really what we're trying to do is encourage the social movement that is the Green Ribbon campaign. And as it is our 11th year, we wanted to just take it to new audiences and have new conversations. So underneath it all, this is the National Stigma Reduction Programme, and I'm briefly going to mention about what stigma is and our understanding of it. So, you know, in a common way of seeing it, it is often seen as a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. And this can be as a result of negative attitudes, which comes from prejudice and behaviour, which is discrimination towards people with mental health difficulties. I suppose this year's theme is really, really important, and it's about the intersection between the ideas of stigma, judgment, and mental health. And it's important to talk about these. So in talking about judgment, it is important to look at it in a different way to how we see stigma. So judgment is a cognitive process, and it is within our human nature. And it's other people's thinking. More importantly, it's also our own thinking about ourselves. And it's really important that we reflect this month on how we think about ourselves and our own understanding of our mental health and any experience that we have of mental illness. Because in practicing judgment, we try to make sense of our environment and assess threats. So it's a natural, healthy behavior and a cognitive function, but it's something that we can actually look at and change because it's something within the realms of our control. When we talk about stigma, it's slightly different because it's a social construct. And really, it's about labels that people put on themselves or each other. And the stigma can really marginalize people in a community. And when we're looking at stigma, we're looking at the idea of it was a natural, healthy function, and it was looking at trying to, again, be safe, but how to look at deviations from the social norm. The problem is when you come to mental illness, there's a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication, and this results in fear and misinformation. And that is where we really are working hard this year to address these issues. And the effects of this intersection between judgment, stigma, and mental illness can be shame, secrecy, social isolation, and a reluctance to seek support. And this puts people at risk. So really, the simple message I have about the Green Ribbon campaign is the more we talk about the message behind the Green Ribbon campaign, the more we improve people's recovery rates, because we increase an opportunity for people to talk and to feel less stigmatized, feel less judged by themselves or others, and maybe seek support at an earlier stage. From a societal perspective, you know, the current issues and challenges impede discussion, they limit awareness and understanding, and they hinder policy development. If we're not talking about it, and, you know, I can see the I Am the Reason campaign for mental health reform is very important. If we don't make these issues, that they are more common than anyone realizes, that we all have lived experience, whether it be as a supporter or experiencing mental illness ourselves at different stages in our life. And the stats point to that. So we can no longer have an otherness in this conversation. I think it's important that we push forward and really encourage a conversation in new places and new realms so that we can get funding for programs and research initiatives and discourage that social disconnect that can happen. So I suppose, just to mention briefly, we all know that stigma can happen in lots of different areas, and I'd encourage people to be mindful of how it can happen in the coffee room when you're having a break and work, how you can say something that might make somebody feel stigmatized, or that judgment might be put on someone that is different if they came back from being physically ill. If a doctor says you're fit for work, then you're fit for work. And but sometimes people think they're being kind and saying, well, I won't ask somebody to do X project because they think they're helping the cause, but you might feel discriminated against. In the media, how mental illness and mental health is represented is very important. In community, it's important that people should not feel shunned or excluded. Similarly, in education, not to be labelled as different or offered opportunities. A biggie is insurance, and that often we can feel discriminated against when we're looking for insurance, especially in relation to getting a mortgage. And then in families, sometimes people's misunderstandings can result in rejection and blame for people having their own experience. So I suppose what I'm saying in the conversation I'm encouraging today is for us to have a paradigm shift and to move towards a situation where we have parity with physical illness and physical health, and that we talk clearly and confidently so that we create a better society for all of us. Just to say to you, similar to what Fiona said, there's a number of ways you can seek help if you find any of the information from today is triggering for you or causes you some stress. And also the Shine number is there if you want to find out more about our services. So for the Sea Change information, you can go to seachange.ie, and for Shine and the services, you can go to shine.ie. We have a number of publications across our websites, and there's a sample of them there that you might find helpful, and you can feel free to download them from our websites. And that's it for me. So I'm going to hand you back over to everybody, and thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for that, Nicola. I think one sentence that you said really stood out to me, that mental health can no longer have an otherness. And
Yeah.
I think that's really powerfully put, in terms of it's always been seen as kind of on the margin, something that's a bit murky, that people do have their best intentions to support but aren't really engaging and listening and really understand what someone has gone through. And I think that brings us then nicely on to the panel discussion, where we're going to delve a little bit deeper into those points. So I'm really fortunate, as I said, to have a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge on today's panel. So we have Brodie Thompson, who is a Sea Change ambassador. Brodie, as you will hear, is originally from Australia, but a love affair with travel. New Zealand, sorry. I think I have the rugby on the brain from Saturday. That's the worst thing I can say to a woman from New Zealand. So sorry about that, Brodie.
Okay.
But I know a love affair with travel led you here to Ireland, and you're working now in marketing full time, but you've also had a career as a primary school teacher, and you really love being around sports and others. You love sea swimming, which is very brave of you here in Ireland and being out in nature. I know you also love art, taking photos, and being out and about, socializing. And I know you identify as bi and you use the she, her as your pronoun. So you're very welcome, Brodie, and I'll get to your first question now in a minute. With Brodie, I have the honour of introducing Paddy McGowan, who is an expert by experience, and I think many of you will know Paddy's work over the years. He's originally from Omagh in County Tyrone, and Paddy has recovered from schizophrenia with the support of other survivors and professionals, and can speak very authoritatively and humanely from the inside out, as Paddy, you would say, really reflecting sensitively, honestly, and even at times painfully on the experiences that you've gone through and hearing voices with schizophrenia. You've been involved in a lot of initiatives, and I think you've really paved the way for those lived experience voices to be at the heart of our mental health policies and our services. We're still on that journey, but we're getting there. I know you were involved in the first Voices conference in Derry in November 1999. You've also a member of the International Network of Treatment Alternatives for Recovery. You also were the first user group, set up the first user group in Ireland in 1994, and you were the founder and chief executive officer of the Irish Advocacy Network, which is very much focused on peer advocacy. You've also been in the National Disability Association's ad hoc focus group on mental health and management. I've a really long list here, but that will give you a taster of what Paddy has been involved in and the change that I think he's personally been involved in driving forward. And then finally, last but definitely not least, we have Dr. Donal O'Keefe, who is a recovery coordinator for Archers Recovery College. Donal is also a person with lived experience of mental health difficulties, of using services and supporting a family member through their recovery journey. He's an academic psychologist focusing on implementing the recovery approach in mental health services to improve service user experience and enhance outcomes for service users and also their family, friends, carers and supporters. So Donal now manages the Arches Recovery College, a service provided by people with lived experience and mental health professionals in Dublin and Wicklow. And I know the college uses the adult education principles to share knowledge and different coping strategies, develop ways of making sense, psychological distress and experience belonging, meaning, and experience belonging, meaning, and empowerment. So big welcome to all of you. Wow, just blown away even reading out some of those bios of how much experience and how much power we have on this virtual Zoom. Brodie, I'm going to come to you first of all. So you're Sea Change Ambassador. Can you maybe talk a little bit more on the importance of breaking down that stigma and challenging judgment of mental health difficulties? What are your own thoughts on doing that and your own experience? That would be great.
Absolutely. So I think in terms of being an ambassador for Sea Change, so I suppose a lot of that in terms of, what is an ambassador for Sea Change as well. I go into different workplaces, create content, all sorts of different things. But in terms of its, breaking down that stigma. And I think by sharing my own story, I may not be an expert in mental health, but I am an expert in knowing my own lived experience. And by talking about it, it's actually helped me. I had so much self-stigma. I, carried through, from a really young age with mental health illness, from eating disorders to an anxiety disorder to depression. And then, I've had time in hospital and all those sorts of things as well, that you felt that shame, you felt that stigma, not only from yourself, but from your community and from your friends and things too. So I think through talking about it and actually, confronting that stigma, it's to, I want to create an environment that, I wish that I'd had. I want to be that voice that I wish that I'd heard, when I was younger and struggling and really isolating myself. Whereas, I think through the network that's created as well through Sea Change as well, is that, it stops that, that isolation. It allows you to connect with others. Like, look, I'm here with, everybody here today on this call. But I think it's, it's one of those things that, it's not to shy away from. I think with being a Sea Change ambassador, it's, allows me to more celebrate being authentically me and celebrate the elements of, having ups and having downs and, those ups and downs being part of, a normal part of life. And, I suppose it's just helped me create that resilience and actually not be embarrassed about, having spent time in hospital for, mental health illness and all those sorts of things as well. But I think it's doing the world a good, not only for educating others, but for me and for reducing my own shame that I was feeling.
That's powerful, Brodie, around the self-stigma. And, we've all influenced by those external contexts. Just a quick follow-up question in terms of, you came from, you've done a lot of traveling and you've ended up here in Ireland. any reflections on, when you came to Ireland, like where we were at in terms of the stigma and judgment, because we're a country that not so long ago, our solution to mental health was institutions. So we're on a journey, but any reflections in terms of where we're at and some of your experiences through your travels?
I think also as well, what brings me like from New Zealand to Ireland is that there is a lot of similarities to bring, even though the countries couldn't be more further apart. There are so many similarities. And I think as well, it's hard for me to contrast because I've moved to Ireland and I live in Dublin. Whereas when I was living in New Zealand, I was living in the South Island, 20 minutes away from a village of about 2,000 people. So I grew up in a very rural environment, but I can imagine what it would be like in those rural environments here in Ireland as well. But, it was non-existent, like if someone, it was all those typical stigma things around, it's attention seeking, everything like that. And even like the shame and everything from family and stuff. But I think, I've actually been really blown away with the support that I've received and like talking with family and stuff back home, in terms of, the likes of like St. John of God's and the Centre for Living and all those sorts of things. Those supports that are available are actually incredible. And like, I actually don't think there's a contrast in terms of, those community-based services in New Zealand. So I think Ireland, everywhere we're all on a journey, and there's still further to go for breaking down that stigma and everything as well, because, we're here having this conversation today. But I think Ireland should be proud of itself and the steps that it has taken, and to have gone through that process, quite recently of getting, healthcare. But yeah, like I think there's still a lot to do, but yeah, like it's not, I don't know, it was better than I thought it would be.
Yeah, no, and I think it's important to acknowledge as well, that there has been a lot of work, and I think, there are a lot of services out there, and I think very, reflective of Ireland, kind of what you were saying. It's a bit of a postcode lottery here in Ireland as well, and that's that. There are great services and there are great initiatives, but we need to scale them up, and we need the funding to do that as well. So yeah, I'll be back to you now in a minute, Brodie, but I'm going to go over to Donal now. Donal, you're very welcome this morning. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Archers Recovery College and the work you do and the people you support, and your own reflections on kind of what we're talking about today?
Thank you, Fiona, for inviting me. So we call Arches a place for being, becoming, and belonging. And the whole focus behind what we do is about building community. So it's like you spoke before about family members feeling frustrated with access to services, service users not experiencing the services they want, and the mental health or professionals feeling really disillusioned and distressed by their experience. And what we do in Arches is we try to build community and we foster the sense of belonging for everybody so that we can, I suppose, all work together to collaboratively support people. So it's, I suppose, we implement what's called the Recovery College model, which is simply adult education principles and then the power of lived experience combined with also the underpinning, I suppose, of research evidence in terms of what we do. So very simply put, we put on and we do what's called co-producing, and we develop in collaboration with everybody courses, talks, in-person social events, and we also and Nicola kindly allows us to provide Shine's key working service here from our building. And the whole, I suppose the important point to state is it's not like a university course where you turn up and it's didactic and you get given and imparted information. The magic happens in the discussion. So it's all about people learning from each other, developing different coping strategies, trying them out, finding different ways to, I suppose, internalized stigma is such a massive thing. So feeling less alone and finally going, okay, it's not just me who's been through this type of experience before. And it's about fostering hope. So all of my staff, and primarily this service is delivered by people with lived experience of mental difficulties or of being a family member of somebody who's experienced those. And the whole idea is that, I suppose, we're learning from the people coming in the door of the recovery colleges just as much as they're learning from us. And it's this constant sharing and building and fostering community. And then we're also able to develop, networks way beyond. We're funded by, we are part of the HSE Mental Health Services, but we work with Shine, we work with Mental Health Reform. Like, we were extremely lucky recently, we were able to have Bear Grogan over to give from Mental Health Reform to speak about all her work around mental health and human rights. We have representatives from Shine coming in, giving an overview of all the supports that they have. So we're constantly trying to, I suppose, bridge the gaps between research, policy, and then practice in the real world. But the key focus behind everything that we do is to inspire hope and to enable people, to provide them with opportunities where, by, I suppose, you can get access into the community, you can connect, you can maybe break down that initial barrier of anxiety of going somewhere new for the first time and being very, very alone and very isolated with your experience. And then the other responsibility we have is actually, it's at a policy level and a higher order level where we train mental health professionals in the recovery approach in mental health. And that really simply is just considering the perspectives and valuing the perspectives of people with lived experience and then integrating them in. So that's, and what we do is, I suppose, everything, or the principle underpinning what we do is co-production. And what that simply means, there's so much innovation fatigue in mental health services nowadays. There's all these buzzwords flying around, but what co-production simply means is collaborating with respect and equality. But it's a game changer if you can implement and work together collaboratively in this way, because psychiatric stigma is still such a barrier to having conversations collaboratively to bring in the conversation forward.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Just a follow-up question in terms of, in Ireland, I think many people on this call, and maybe Paddy will talk about it as well, we've had great aspirations on paper, but what we require is a cultural shift, that acknowledgement of, the voices, people accessing the services, how important that is, and really, bit by bit changing the culture in the service. How do you feel that is going? You're doing really great work and working hand in hand with professionals, but any reflections on, how can we push that cultural shift at a faster pace, perhaps?
It's a key challenge. And I think for many reasons, I suppose, mental health professionals are doing Trojan work. People have extremely positive experiences, services, extremely negative experiences, and then neutral ones somewhere in between. And their workloads, require them to see people for a certain period of time, and there's a certain number of barriers there. What we know from 30 years of research now with the recovery approach is that it's not more money that's required, or it's just a way of connecting with people. So giving them an opportunity to support them in their meaning making of the stress, and not just see, for example, the experience of hearing voices as a symptom of psychosis, to understand what it means for the person in their own lives. Where the lever shifts, and what I've learned from Ammonium Post now for a year and a half, but what we adopt in Arches is a hearts and minds approach. So there's the basic fundamental understanding that this is a human rights issue. This is a social movement where we're looking for lived experience to be treated with respect and to be championed. The second piece, so ultimately that's in line with the UNCRPD, and that's focused on empowerment. So we need people to understand that they have certain rights and that they need and require and deserve a mental health service, to respect them in that way and to provide that service. The second piece, and you have to, when you're working with mental health professionals, you always have to come back to the evidence. And we know from 30 years of research now that if we implement the mental health services in a way that focuses on optimism, focuses on providing people with choice, focuses on the beautiful words of Patricia Deegan, the dignity of risk and right to fail, we know the outcomes are better. And we also know when people have been interviewed time and time again from their experience in mental health services, the one thing that they're looking for is compassion, is empathy, and is being given the opportunity to make sense of their experience. So I suppose in those, to answer your question, Fiona, that's how we've been embarking on the journey. But there's been huge progress made in the HSE in the last few years. The Office of Mental Health Engagement and Recovery now is well established. It has programs across the whole of both recovery education and engagement and peer support. So recovery education is what we do. We develop a program to support people. Engagement is learning what mental health services are like for people and then making recommendations for change. And then peer support is working one-on-one to use lived experience to improve things. And then the other whole area that's opening up now is patient and public involvement in research. So actually shifting the conversation at that really high level so that research priorities reflect our own lived experience. But it is a journey, but I think we have a huge amount to celebrate. And that there's evidence there that we're really progressing things. And also in every, like there's recovery colleges now in almost every county in Ireland. So the whole idea, or at least in every CHO, so we're really moving together, and the recovery college is a space for everyone to collaborate together.
Yeah, and I think that sense of belonging, that's important. And there are spaces out there for people maybe on the call who want to get involved and want to make their voice heard and be part of that as well. Paddy, I'm going to come to you now. Donal was talking about, we've 30 years of research to show this works, but 30 years ago, you were to the forefront of pushing this agenda forward, setting up the Irish Advocacy network, and you've been able to personally use your own experience to affect positive change, I think, in the mental health system. Can you tell us about, your own journey, how you drew upon your experiences to raise your voice and to get those kind of system changes?
Paddy, you'll just need to unmute.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you now, Paddy.
Sorry about that. I'm not great with technology, but first of all, thanks for the invite to speak. I haven't been doing a lot of work this last while, doing a lot of work with individuals. Still get a huge amount of people. In fact, just a letter this morning from a family in Dublin seeking help. I've tried everywhere. I've tried different moves and one thing and another, and still find themselves caught in a barrier. The whole thing about the user part of it, or I don't like the word user. I still prefer, I'm old school, still prefer the word, the description of survivor. To me, when I was in hospital, it becomes so apparent that when we were there, we weren't people. We were something to be treated. We were something that people come in and work with to the best of their ability, and left, and that was it. And when I got out of hospital, I thought to myself, there has, why is it we haven't got a voice? Why is it, when we speak, nobody listens? So that sort of pushed me and a number of other very brave people in Omagh and County Tyrone to set up the first survivor group in 1984. We set it up, the Sparing Users Forum, which then become Heads Together later on. And we linked up with other groups across that were starting to emerge across the north, especially in Derry, Martha McClelland, and the group of people that she had, and Marty Daly in Belfast with the group that he had. And we started to work that way. And then we started to come down into the south. We realised that from the top of the country to the bottom of the country, the system that we were in was wrong. It was deplorable, to be quite honest about it. And to be quite honest, I don't think we have changed very much since it. I think we have took down a lot of the walls that are there, but we have created them in different places. The amount of beds that we have in places now outside of hospitals and all, there's a whole lot of work that still needs to be done. Whilst I congratulate and applaud all of the work that has been done, I still believe there's a lot more to do. I think there's a lot of lip service still played to a lot of the moves and achievements that people have made. Like to take advocacy for an example, in the 1990s, when we set up the network, we got funding. The only place you could get funding was through the Department of Health, which we were grateful for, and then through the local health boards, now the HSE. But on reflection, I would have thought almost 30, 40 years later on, that we would have been in a position where that sort of funding going to an advocacy organisation wasn't coming from a state-funded body, or it wasn't coming from a government, and that in that sense, because it has hugely restricted the amount of work that people can do, and what they can do, what they can say, where they can stand up. So it has never been actually the advocacy service that those that started from in the early days wanted to get to. We've never got to it. We're nowhere near getting to where we need to be at that level. We have made huge strides, there's no doubt about it, but we're still, as far as I'm concerned, I still see us still sitting exactly where we were a number of years ago, probably in different environments, but still at that. The struggle hasn't changed. The struggle hasn't become any easier. It's still a constant battle, and I don't believe the full appreciation or wanting of government bodies and all the rest to make this happen, to make it a reality, so that people can actually go and do what they need to do. In this day and age, people shouldn't be having to send letters through the door of a private house of somebody that hasn't been in the system for a long time or hasn't worked for a long time due to health reasons. I still get 40, 50, maybe 60 letters a week. I still get at least on a daily basis 30, 40, 50 phone calls a day, sometimes even more, from people that are desperate, that have tried everything. They've went through the services, they've tried their very best to work within that system and fail all the time. And it's not their fault to fail. A lot of the time it's not their fault. The services aren't there for them. A very basic example, we have and I've been harping about this for the last 25 years, we still have the lowest level of psychology provision anywhere in the Western world. In fact, some of the third world countries have a better psychology services and practitioners that we have. Good practitioners that we have, but what's out there. And we still, to this present day, are still trading on the idea of the medical model. We've changed the name now. I would actually argue we don't have recovery. We don't do recovery in Ireland. We have taken the concept, that survivor concept of recovery, and to make it, because it was becoming a sort of a buzzword a number of years back, and psychiatry itself had to jump on the back of something because they were starting to lose ground. So they captured it, reorganized it, and changed it about, and tell us that we don't do recovery in Ireland. People attempting to try it, yes, there's no doubt about that. But the recovery that I come from, or Mary Ellen and the rest of the original sort of survivors that started this whole thing moving on, we haven't got anywhere near that. We've just changed the handcuffs to slightly softer ones than what we had a number of years back. But in saying that, there has been a lot of good work done, and I applaud all of the organisations and people and individuals that are out there doing it. But we still have a lot to do.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really powerful message, Paddy, because, we're a mental health reform. We do a lot of work around reforming the Mental Health Act. And one of the big outstanding issues is we wanted to enshrine the right to advocacy in the Mental Health Act, to make it a right for, to put it at the highest level in legislation. And it hasn't been done. And I think, the failure to do that speaks in some way to, the failure to truly acknowledge what advocacy is, and that it is still needed to be scaled up in this country. So we're still, I think we're still being loud on that issue, and we'd ask everyone in this call to support us in that as well. But yeah, there's certainly a huge amount to go, and to look at the system strategically. There's a lot of plasters being put everywhere. I think you're right in terms of we need to look at what can we scale up and how can we support individuals. In terms of I suppose like that there's loads of work to be done, but if you could speak a little bit around your own personal experience, how did you feel kind of speaking out? Like Brodie spoke about that self-stigma and how it kind of helped her to kind of overcome a little bit of that. Did you find the experience of, coming together, working together with other survivors and setting up this initiative? Was there a power in that at all, Paddy?
There was originally, Fiona, but my very first conference that I ever spoke at, I was sectioned and taken off the stage because I was talking about the sort of stuff we're talking about today. You know, I was using the word, I was talking about paradigm shifts 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And we still use it. We still use the same language today. You know, so there was power in one sense, yes, the very fact. And in fact, in the original, the very early days, if truth be told, all we were really doing was giving two fingers up to the system. We didn't actually believe that there was enough power to make the sort of changes, but we wanted to try and make those changes. So it was a two finger up to the system at that time. So it developed, and it developed further down the line because there was a lot of hard work and putting into trying to bring up initiatives and think of different ways. I got sectioned actually for saying that we hadn't got a mental health act in Ireland, north or south. We had a psychiatric health act because we never had a mental health act. Never from day one. We've had a psychiatric health act. So the reality is, even that piece, even you mentioning that, Fiona, it brings it back to me in that sense, that the very fact that we talk about a mental health act that doesn't exist, you know, and the very fact that we have, even if I want to accept the terminology of a mental health act, even that we have that in 2023, when we're trying to marry that alongside recovery, the two don't match, the two don't fit together. You know, so we haven't got a recovery-oriented system or services when we still feel the need that we have to force people to accept a belief system that they may not want to believe or have any power against. You know, so yeah, it give me power. It give me and others that sense of that fight, that there needed to be justice. There needed to be equality. There needed to be that sort of paternalistic idea that we will tell you what to do and how you will do it. That isn't going to work. It will never work anywhere within this mental health system across the world. As long as there's a power balance, and that power balance is weighed towards the system, this is not about equality. It'll never bring equality.
Thanks, Paddy. I think, you know, it's hard to argue with those points you raise in terms of, you know, moving away from the paternalistic, and we're still on that journey. And I think that's the power of, you know, and you might not see the change that you created from the work that you did, but I think I can see it slowly in little pockets here and there. You know, you were part of that change, and thank you, and all the others, and thank you for your continuing work as well. And I think that brings me kind of to the final question. I'm going to bring Nicola back in. You know, we've heard brilliant insights from our panelists, and you know, around the progress, how we're shifting that narrative, the dialogue is moving, but perhaps not at a pace that we'd like it to. And we know recovery is very unique to everyone. And just to bring you back maybe to something you raised in your presentation around the role of education and on mental health and recovery, in addressing judgments that people, especially people who, you know, out in the public, who I don't know if there's many of them there, but who may not have experience of mental health, and maybe more the moderate to severe mental health difficulties. But can you speak about the role that education and initiatives like Sea Change and, you know, people coming forward can have in breaking down that stigma?
Yeah, and I think it lends on from Paddy's point. You know, I really enjoyed listening to Paddy speaking because it brings back some of the memories. Some of them are stressful memories from trying to talk to people in the past about ways of thinking and ways of working that the organizations and the system was not ready for. And I found my solution to that was sometimes to change jobs out of frustration, or as I did now, leave the HSE and work on the outside to bring in change differently. But for me, when I see Brodie speaking, you know, one of the best bits of that whole campaign, you know, which is a movement, is when I see people's eyes light up when an ambassador speaks, because I can do all the PowerPoint presentations, I can wallpaper the walls with evidence-based models, but when somebody sees someone that's just like them, and it doesn't matter what their experience was, but they can talk about their first experience of having a psychotic episode, an admission to hospital, what it's like to have your privileges and your freedom withdrawn, you know, to be heard differently. The voice of somebody telling their story makes it much more human, and it makes people be heard and see, and the myths be dispelled. And even with the reference group that I work with NIMIC, to see members of the reference group articulate issues so clearly that they just blow a hole through it, and there's no excuses for any concern they express, and they've educated themselves and informed themselves, so that, you know, I just beam with pride when I hear what they have to say. I think it's that we cannot go anywhere unless we put the voice of people with lived experience and their supporters at the center of everything we do. And that's from planning the building at the foundations upwards. And we have failed to do that. And it's often been tokenistic and frustrating. And I think we also need to be ethical about how we do it. So we need to look at, if we're bringing people's voices in, payment is a big bugbear of mine, valuing people's time. I know some people don't want to be paid. They feel it changes the relationship, but it is about the offer of payment. And I know the government is working on that. And also to see people as equals. I think sometimes when I've worked on different HSE committees, the acronyms and the language can be disempowering and can be a barrier to understanding conversations. And so it's to get the voice, that to encourage people to be assertive but supported, so they're not feeling on the outside through subtle and nuanced ways that people maintain their power. But I think, you know, I'd hate to be in my 20s and 30s again, because I was very frustrated with the system and the rate of change, because what's happened now, I expected to happen in the 90s, and we're still moving on a very slow trajectory towards improvement. But it is lovely to hear the words, even if people don't understand them or live them the right way, the words are coming into play now. And I'm less frustrated by the rate of change, because I'm more at peace with it now when I see when the magic happens, it happens well.
Yeah, and I think there's space now being created for those voices and for people who, you know, to have those difficult conversations, and that people are not othered for bringing up what you said, Paddy, you know, very relevant questions in the past, and you were kind of not allowed to express those. So Donal, coming to you kind of with the same question, the kind of the role of education in mental health and recovery and judgment, what are your thoughts having heard all the input from panelists?
I think Paddy makes a really important point, and there's many people that feel abandoned to the recovery approach, because it's the idea that here's hope, here's meaning, go off and recover yourself, and they feel like services are being pulled from them. And there's this, I suppose, reality, I suppose, that's happened, and this is what happened with policy and buzzwords, whereby the service ends up co-opting lived experience, or taking that political movement that Paddy so eloquently described, and the social movement that is recovery, and making services more acceptable or more palatable or more friendly and warm in terms of the way they're described, so that the language changes, the lexicon changes, the words that we use change, but there's lip service paid to the recovery model. And I think the power of what we do in Arches Recovery College around recovery education is to try and hold on to hope for the recovery journey of the services themselves, almost. So, and one of the things that bothers me a lot, because the core issue here is psychiatric stigma. Okay, so like my own lived experience means that I can end up at a high level committee meeting where the psychiatrist who was, you know, heavily involved in my care is sitting there. And the challenge for me struggling with that is, you know, realizing, you know, this is a boundaried relationship, and we're in a professional role now, but that memory is still very, very much there, alive and real. Where education comes in and where it's so powerful is when it's grounded in the real world evidence that we know, right? So this is what bothers me a lot of times behind, like, I suppose, Shannon's some phenomenal work around increasing the conversation, and everyone now is speaking so much more around mental health. but sometimes what's lacking is direct evidence to challenge misconceptions. So key concern and a key form of psychiatric stigma is that people diagnosed with psychosis or indeed schizophrenia are more likely to be violent than the general population. We know from so much research now at this point that actually people with experience with psychosis and schizophrenia are more likely to be the victims of crime than the perpetrators, because they stand out, because sometimes their behavior is different from others. We also know that this whole idea of recovery pessimism being attached to predictor diagnoses is completely inaccurate. So like I used to work in the detective psychosis service, and we followed up with people 20 years after we're diagnosed with a first episode psychosis, and 53% of people we interviewed, and keep in mind this was an epidemiologically complete group, so it's the best science that you can do to track outcome. 53% thought they were fully recovered according to their own every definition of recovery that they hold. So when it comes to education and actually changing the conversation, it's very much, I suppose, the awareness of how common, for example, psychosis is. So 1 in 100 people, 3 in 100 people will experience psychosis, 1 in 100 people may be diagnosed with schizophrenia. So this is, our lives are skewed, our understanding of outcome, and particularly clinicians as well, because they see people typically when they're at their worst or when they're really struggling. There's this thing called the clinician's illusion, where there's an assumption of pessimism and potential not being there because people who work within the system don't see people thriving. They don't see people, going above and beyond, their expectations, and that then leads to self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think the role of education is really around bringing everything together, bringing the research, bringing the lived experience, and really importantly, bringing the clinician's perspective in, because a lot of times they're ignored and admitted, and they're struggling too. They're having their own challenges, and people who work within the system have lived experience too. That's a really important state, and they can draw on that in their own work, and that needs to be valued and protected as well, just as much as people who don't have the experience.
Thanks, Donal, and thank you for everyone. We're going slightly over time, but I really think it's such a powerful conversation. I don't want to end it just yet. So thank you for everyone for staying with us. I'm going to just go to Brodie and Paddy to answer the same question. I know people had their hands up in the audience, but unfortunately, we don't have time to take questions today. If you want to put into the text box, we'll take note of everything and get back to you. But Brodie, what are your thoughts on that education piece and kind of creating those spaces for people to come forward?
Absolutely. Like, I think in terms of, education is empowering. And I think in terms of, I don't know, I think if I reflect on, my own education, in terms of what I've learned around mental illness and stuff as well, I think some of the things that I've learned within, the hospital setting and stuff have been, part of the most integral thing. And I think from coming from an educational background as well, so I studied education, and through that aspect of things is that, like, you need to provide the tools, and you can't expect people to, find things out for themselves. You need to have the facilitation there without it being, dictating. But I think, it's like those fundamental things as well, like, even knowing that, like, happiness is a skill. I don't know. I think in terms of one of those educational pieces, that's always something that I'll always remember.
And Paddy, what's, 30 years time, what do we need to do to ensure in 30 years time that recovery is an intrinsic part of the system? What can individuals listening today do to try and kind of help move things forward? What would your reflections be as someone who's current, even still supporting so many people? And you can see in the comments, people are so grateful for the work you continue to do. But what would your thoughts be? What would be your advice kind of for everyone involved in this space about how we can continue to make those voices heard and ensure that we are moving to that kind of more human rights recovery focused services, not just on paper, but actually living those in the realities of what our services look like?
Well, I suppose, Fiona, the education piece is vitally important. Like, I remember working over the years with student nurses, different people going into the mental health profession, and still a lot of them will come back and say to me, you challenged me, you challenged my thinking, and it probably helped me to develop a different way of working with people. So education is vitally important, there's no question about that. It brings me back to the research piece that Damon's talking about, 100% correct. The first piece of user research we done was if I'm correct, 1989. It was done with the Foyle Trust in Derry. We're the first trust actually in the 32 counties, or the first health service, part of a mental health service, that actually invited the likes of survivors to design a piece of research, to bring it then and carry it out. Now we had our fights with management and one thing and another about questions, but it ended up, I put my foot down. The very last, there was a 10 or 12 question piece of research. It wasn't nothing academic like what I would have done years later, but we done the first piece of research and we got the answers. The trust got the answers they wanted, and we sort of got what we wanted. But the last question that I asked, and I argued to have it asked, and there was a fight about it, but eventually they gave in. The question I asked the group of people that were in the daycare service, where did they see themselves in 5 years? 99.9% of them said still in the same place. And it come back to me, I was asked about 6 months ago to sit in a small community grouping of people with mental health difficulties in their families, and using services, both inpatient, outpatient, and day services. And we were talking, and I asked the same question of the family members, and I also asked the same question of the people that were using the services there. And guess what? 99.9% of them said the same place. They didn't see any difference. They would be still within the mental health system. They'd be still diagnosed with whatever illness they were diagnosed, or so-called illness they were diagnosed with, and their family members were in the same, they were saying the same thing. We can't see any difference. We can't see where we're going, what's going to happen. So the education piece, yeah, vitally important, but the reality of it is bigger than that. We need action. We need action. There needs to be more action. And there needs to be stronger action taken by all of the organizations and individuals that need to have a system in place that meets their needs as they need them, not as they're decided for by somebody else. So that work, that piece of work will continue, and it will continue long after I'm in a box in the ground or wherever. That piece of work will always have to continue, because if we don't keep that push on, things will never change.
Yeah, no, that's a really powerful call to action, Paddy, and I think it's really, we need to continue to push. That is really startling, around kind of people not having hope of, living their life to the best of their ability, be it living independently, having a house, access to education, to a job. This is not just, about, the health services alone. This is about giving hope to individual and ensuring all of those pieces, which makes living life a reality. The jigsaw comes together. Yeah, so I've taken one over time. So I'm just going to kind of very quickly just conclude by thanking everyone for today. Thank you for bearing with us through our IT challenges, to the panel in particular, this morning while we sorted everything out. And just, there's so many people who've joined in the conversation today online, and just to ask you to, every voice is important. There is a power in numbers, and so often, people with mental health difficulties, and we've heard it's been continued. We've seen the recent CAMS report, and we've seen parents who for the first time went, God, I'm not alone in this journey. It's not just me facing into this system that's not working for me. I've had parents who I've been talking to who felt that, they didn't want to speak out in case of the repercussions that would have on the young person who's accessing their services. And you know, that speaks out. You know, if it was anything else, you know, we can hear the huge movement at the moment, and rightly so, around, you know, the spina bifida and the scandal around that. But we need parents, we need young people, we need people accessing service to equally feel comfortable in speaking out around the inadequate mental health services and supports they are receiving. And part of that is the work that we're doing through Sea Change, through the Green Ribbon campaign, through our own mental health reform pre-budget campaign, hashtag I'm a Reason. And I think Niamh right on cue is putting up the slide. You know, I'm just urging everyone, you know, again, there's power in numbers. If we need funding, you know, funding means that this issue is prioritized, and it hasn't been. So please, you know, look up our website, contact your TD. We have a very simple uplift link. You click on it and it sends emails to the to your TDs, telling them that you want them to prioritize mental health, and sign up to our newsletter. So much of what's come up today has actually reminded me of the work we're doing around our Mental Health Act. There's still a long way to go in ensuring our legislation is compliant to international human rights standards and laws, and we will continue that fight for a long time. So do sign up to our newsletter. But yeah, just Míle buíochas. Thank you so much to Sea Change for partnering with us. And, you know, I think thank you to the panelists and for those who've tuned in today. So yeah, have a lovely day, everyone, and let's continue to make our voice loud together. Go Mike.